Good evening, everybody, and welcome. I'm Susan Steinberg. I'm president of the Stuyvesant Town Peter Cooper Village Tenants Association, and I would like to welcome you to our 2025 annual meeting. I'd like to also welcome our board members and our new board members, and I'm going to call the names of our current board, and I'm going to ask our board members to wave when I call their names in alphabetical order. We have Kirsten Adal, Chair, John DeRico, Ann Greenberg, Vice President of External Affairs, Cheryl Kirschenbaum, Adam Liggio, Treasurer, Lynn Janofsky, and Sandro Sherrod. And I'd also like to welcome and introduce our electeds. We have Congressman Gerald Nadler and our council member Keith Powers. Momentarily, we will be expecting Kristen Gonzalez. She's probably at an airport trying to find a quiet spot. Unfortunately, our assembly member, Harvey Epstein, had a conflict and he's unable to be with us. I'll forgive him this time. So here is the way the meeting will proceed. We'll discuss the results of the election. I will name our new directors and get them to give you a wave. We will have a business presentation from our treasurer, Adam Liggio. Then, oddly enough, I'm going to adjourn the meeting, but don't go away because that's something we have to do by our bylaws. We have to adjourn the business portion of the meeting, and then we immediately continue into the general portion of the meeting. I'll review some major issues that have been facing us, and then I'm going to turn the meeting over to our elected representatives for a presentation, and after that we will have a Q&A. Because this is campaign season, all of our elected representatives are hard pressed. And so I am absolutely determined that our meeting will be over at 7:30 so everybody can go their separate ways in different parts of the city or the country. So with that in mind, I'd like to say that as set forth in the bylaws of the Stuyvesant Town Peter Cooper Village Tenants Association, a quorum of votes for the annual meeting is 10% of the members or 100 votes, whichever is less. We have had 27% of the membership vote, and I therefore confirm that a quorum has been met for the annual election of directors, and therefore we call the annual meeting to order. Members have voted for the following nominees for boards of directors. Please wave when I call your name. Orshulya Martha, Richard Bengloff, I don't know if he's on yet, Cheryl Kirschenbaum, who's an incumbent and a current member, Karen Pazrika, Sandro Sherrod, another incumbent, Andrew Simpson, David Stanek. I don't know if Paul Tasner is here, but we voted for Paul, and Shuya Joe. I would like to thank our two incumbents, Cheryl and Sandro, for their continuing service and heartily welcome our new members. Really looking forward to working with you. So now our treasurer, Adam Liggio, will present a statement of the TA's financial position. You're mute.
Oh, I do that every year. Thank you, Susan. We currently have 141,642 working capital. This working capital is from our membership dues, which can be paid monthly as well as annually. So that all our neighbors can be members, we offer a reduced membership rate for those participating in SCREE and DREAP programs. The major expenses for the association, which came to a total of 80% of our dues, includes legal fees, expert consultants, our database, communications, including mailings, flyers, our web and Facebook pages, and our telephone message center. Legal fees covered our challenges on various major capital improvement rent increases, a suit against the State Department of Housing and Community Renewal for their reasonable cost schedule for major capital improvements, and other miscellaneous legal issues. I'll finish my statement. Back to you, Susan.
Thank you. Adam, I just want to point out that I think you left thousands off the first number when you were saying 144 something. I think you meant to say thousands.
Yes, I'm sorry, I have a tooth problem. 141,642.
Okay. Otherwise, we're coming off as kind of impoverished. Okay, so now that we've done the business portion of our meeting, I adjourn it and open the general annual meeting. So here are some of the major things going on. The first thing is gas repiping. Some of you have had it, some of you are having it as we speak, and some of you will be having it. So it's very likely that management will bring the gas repiping to just about all of the buildings in our community because it's aging infrastructure. And along the way, they are recouping their costs through a major capital improvement. The rent increases have varied. At the very beginning of the project, they were a little north of $2 per room. And now, at the latest one, they're up to $12 per room, which is really rather a lot of money, especially as we're looking at RGB increases shortly. So some of you are kind of concerned about what goes on with one of these repiping. I'll just tell you that in their favor, Beam has been very good about keeping people advised for the most part. They'll send you a notification in advance outlining the steps of the project and what you need to do. They are now phasing the project so that they just take and upgrade one line at a time or two lines at a time, but nevertheless, as soon as they start the repair project, they turn the gas off for the entire building, but will deliver to you in advance of any work a double hot plate. I'm very happy to tell you that I'm able to boil a kettle of water on this hot plate, because if I couldn't have my coffee, I wouldn't even be able to speak tonight. At any rate, they will eventually go in. If your piping is enclosed in cabinetry, they'll remove it. They'll remove the pipes, whether it's enclosed or not. They'll replace it. If you have cabinetry, they'll build it back and paint. Then they'll do pressure testing, reconnect the gas valve, and it'll be inspected by the Department of Buildings in Con Edison. When Con Edison says it's safe and the gas goes on, then the project is considered complete. You will not have a working stove and you will not have a laundry room. Now, one of the things that they changed for the most recent projects for 9, 7, and 5 Stuyvesant Oval is the method of crediting your rent or reimbursement. It used to be that you would get a credit to your rent in accordance with the number of bedrooms you had. They just changed it recently, and they're giving either a $500 gift certificate for you to buy, electric ovens or whatever you have to do, or you can decide to go with $250 for every 2 weeks that it takes the project to get finished. The TA spoke with management about this because we felt that there were it wasn't as optimal as the prior system. And first of all, you have to gamble. You have to say, oh, what's going to be better for me, the $500 at the beginning or the $250 for every 2 weeks at the end? So we didn't care for that. But Beam is adamant, and that is the system that we have now. Okay, and I can probably speak more to some of the details in the Q&A. So now, we prevailed to keep add-on costs for major capital improvements down. Now, what I'm talking about is that when an MCI is based on a schedule of cost promulgated by the Division of Housing and Community Renewal, called, ironically enough, the reasonable cost schedule. And this is not a reasonable cost schedule. So in addition to, the schedule lists maximum cost for each item of things such as roofing, facades, infrastructure, plumbing, but the landlords typically add on to the maximum cost for things that are really not part of the, should not be part of the project, such as architectural fees or pressure washing and things of that nature. So we challenged it. And when our attorney, Seth Miller of Collins, Dobkin and Miller, argued the case, the judges kept questioning the DHCR lawyers. Well, what exactly is a maximum? If it's legislated as a maximum, it's a maximum. There shouldn't be any additional cost. And in its decision, the court held that any cost not mentioned in the schedule cannot be the basis of an MCI. Owners cannot recoup costs higher than those in a reasonable cost schedule. So effectively, what we have done is keep costs down. Oh, that we could eliminate them altogether, but that's another world. So on to the next topic. I will just briefly mention this because I know that our electeds may have more to say on the subject, but the coalition had mounted an absolute Herculean legal effort to keep Mount Sinai Beth Israel Hospital, the only hospital that services downtown Manhattan, open. But after much delay and restraining orders and what have you, the Mount Sinai Beth Israel got the approval from the court and they closed on March 26th. Some of you may know that they have opened a urgent care center on 2nd Avenue and 14th Street, which is very nice, but it's no substitute for a full-service hospital because they can't take care of really serious issues like stroke or heart attack. So what is happening is that people with serious issues are being sent to either Bellevue or Mount Sinai. I'm sorry, Bellevue or NYU, and they're overloaded, they're overwhelmed, and people wait hours and hours or days and days to get seen. So the coalition didn't want to give up, and there is a huge project. You've probably heard of Northwell. They have a huge project plan for across the street from Lenox Hill Hospital. It's out of scale and the community's totally against it. And we were hoping somehow that we could persuade Northwell to downsize the plan and put some of that money for a micro hospital in place of Beth Israel, but so far no joy. I do want you to know that the community board is still working on finding some kind of medical solution so that we're not totally bereft. All right, on to the Kips Bay Science Park and Research Center, SPARC. So the SPARC is a massive 1.5 million square foot academic public health and life sciences complex. And right across the street from it on the old public health building is going to be Innovation East, a new 13-story building, 500 square feet of life sciences laboratories. SPARC will be built on the site of the Hunter School of Nursing. At any rate, the community had concerns about accessibility, traffic flow, open space, and resident-friendly retail. So our councilman, Keith Powers, convened a community task force, and they have been meeting and speaking with the agencies in SPARC to get them to address some of those concerns. So I will let Keith talk about that more later. Finally, I'm going to talk about something that is going to sound scary, but I really don't want you to start losing sleep and biting your nails. We have enough things to keep us from doing that. Some of you may have remembered that a few months ago, the Supreme Court decided not to consider a case that would have done away with rent control. And we all breathed a sigh of relief, but we have to start holding our breath again because a long-running property rights movement. It has been gaining momentum, and it's been championing property rights over all tenant rights. And the Supreme Court is now considering a case, a request from California landlords that could strike at the heart of tenants' rights. This is the case that, if won, could declare the expired COVID-19 eviction moratorium unconstitutional on the basis of being something called a regulatory taking. And that means a taking is when the government is overreaching and restricting the use of property. In other words, property owners should have the right to evict tenants, and the COVID eviction moratoriums were illegal. So, as part of the property rights campaign, landlords are increasingly attacking New York City's rent control and good cause eviction protections. With the current composition of the Supreme Court, there is now a chance that tenant protections across the nation will be at risk. And here is the essential principle under discussion. That is, does the treasured rights of property ownership outweigh tenant protections? Note, we are not treasured. Do current laws preventing landlords from evicting tenants who breach their leases intrude on one of the most fundamental elements of property ownership, the right to exclude? I just want you to know that your TA and the attorneys and the electeds are keeping our eyes out on this. And to the extent that we can do anything, we will. We have your backs. And with that, I am going to turn the meeting over to our electeds. So because I know that he has to rush off to another meeting, I'm going to start with Keith Powers. Keith, please present.
Thank you. And Susan, I am in the same gas situation as you are, just being a building down from you. So I feel the struggle right now. I'm glad you got your coffee, as I've been doing each morning. Nice to see everyone. One of your neighbors here, Keith Powers. First of all, congratulations to all the new directors. And I was once on this board. It's the best tenants association in New York City, but also one that's really important to the tenants movement, because the work that we do here in Stuyvesant Town actually has a big impact on the entire city and rent stabilized tenants throughout the city. So we can use our power, our legal power, our political power, our tenant power to help fuel a tenant movement all throughout the city. And I'm deeply grateful for what you guys do. Just know that if that rent stabilization case goes to the Supreme Court again, I know Congressman Nadler will be there. I will be there. We will all be there fighting that tooth and nail. I will get the city of New York, hopefully, to do an amicus brief to fight against that and to make sure we fight strongly against that. Second is, before I go into my substantive update, we got a rent guidelines board process in front of us. Like every year, I'm calling to make sure I'm calling for no increase on tenants. I'm deeply concerned about what the higher limits and, frankly, what the proposal is today. So we'll be at the rent guidelines board fighting with my colleagues against that, as we do every year. And when you look at all the combined costs of MCIs, of rent increases, it has a really meaningful impact on so many of us. So thank you for the Tenants Association for everything you do. Just a few updates. One is I want to talk about the Kips Bay project that was mentioned earlier. Really big project, really important project to basically transform. As many of us know, there's a Hunter Brookdale campus on 25th Street and First Avenue. It's sort of on that stretch from 23rd up to 34th, where there's really no storefronts, no retail, not much going on there, and a somewhat dilapidated Hunter campus there. Years ago, they proposed putting a sanitation garage in there, and Councilmember Garodnick had said no to that. I had said no to that, feeling like it would overburden that neighborhood and Stuyvesant Town, Peter Cooper, and the area by having, hundreds of trucks coming through there every single day at the end or the beginning of their routes. But we did also see the opportunity to do something way more transformative. So we told them, hold on, let's get to the table. And we were able to come up with a much better proposal that does way more for our community than that original proposal. Just to give you the highlights of it, we are essentially going to build a new CUNY campus there for life sciences. We're going to build a new high school there for life sciences, and we're going to build some new careers in life sciences there as well. We're going to build some new open space and activate spaces that have been closed to the public for a long time, and really kind of create a connected facility that can serve multiple levels of your education or your career if you live in this area. Let me go through the real details of it. Essentially, we're going to replace the CUNY Brookdale campus just north of Peter Cooper with a new CUNY facility, a new high school, public health infrastructure, a new space to basically boost the life sciences here in New York City. We think that's an area that's going to grow a whole lot. We worked with the Tenants Association, Community Board 6, and the other neighborhood association, the tenant groups, to try to figure out a proposal that would make the most sense. And kind of, as I noted, what we're getting is a brand new high school and a new public STEAM center, which serves 10 high schools, basically a place where they can get STEM and STEAM, what we call STEAM education outside of their classroom, as well as the high school that's going to be there on the campus. We're getting a new CUNY campus. We're actually getting a few CUNY colleges there, a new Hunter College campus, a new BMCC campus, and a new CUNY Graduate Center for Public Health. We're getting a bunch of nonprofits to come in that basically will help do programming in the local middle schools and elementary schools, so they get access to the life sciences programming there as well. I fought really hard and like almost held this whole thing up over getting some 3K seats for our neighborhood because there are so many families who are still begging for more 3K seats. We got 30 something new seats, I believe it was, in the area, which is kind of as much as we could find of capacity, but that's just new 3K seats for the neighborhood. Some new city facilities for Bellevue and the medical examiner, a whole new acre of public space that's going to be open to everyone. We're opening up a new park that's been closed at Bellevue Garden. That will be now an open and available public park. We are turning part of this a private parking lot on the waterfront where there is parking today. We're finally going to turn that into a park on the East River. We're going to program it in a certain way, but more recreational, but it's going to continue to build waterfront access in that area. That was a big Community Board 6 priority that we were able to fund as part of this. A new pedestrian bridge for Waterside Plaza if you want to cross over, a new ADA bridge there, and just thousands of new jobs, thousands of new school seats as part of that. It's a way better project than when we started, when it was a sanitation garage. And I think it will provide a lot of good paying jobs, a lot of new high school seats within walking distance, and hopefully some college seats that kids can take advantage of here as well. We also are relocating the dorms that were there, the 800 dorms, not too far, stay on the east side, and we're actually expanding the amount of CUNY dorms that will be there as well. So it's a nice, I think, win for our community, a win for the city, and a boost for our economy, much better than what we had in the first place. A few other updates I want to just share with you on the legislative side. We have often talked about the noisy helicopters that fly over Central Park, fly over our neighborhood, not too far from where we live on 34th Street. Of course, there's a heliport. We have heard constant complaints about the noise. So we actually just passed legislation. I was the sponsor of it, and it basically will eliminate non-essential helicopter flights out of the heliports here in New York City, unless they convert to a new, much quieter version of the helicopters that exist there today. These are basically they're not loud, you can barely hear them, sort of version of a helicopter. I've been carrying this bill for a long time. They'll only be allowed if it's like news coverage or medical or the police or something like that. But we're gonna, I think Susan's cutting me off. I got your text, but anyway, so we passed a really good bill over that. You will send some more information about that. We're working on a couple other things. We just passed our big scaffolding reform, which of course has hit Stuyvesant Town to get rid of the scaffolding. Much more. I'll end there because I have to run and you guys got a big program here. Thank you as always for everything you guys do. Call, email. Ben from my office is on here as well, paying attention, and we are here to help.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Keith. It's nice to know that I caused terror in the hearts of my panelists. All right, let's hear from Congressman Gerald Nadler.
Well, good evening, everyone, and Thanks for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be with you tonight. I'm happy to hear the opportunity to hear your priorities and to share updates from Washington. Our democracy, in my opinion, is facing a dire threat. In fact, I think it's the most critical threat since the Civil War, as Donald Trump works to consolidate power, silence opposition, and undermine government institutions. Just last week, House Republicans passed Trump's so-called Big Beautiful Bill, a disastrous measure that would take health insurance away from over 10 million Americans, strip food assistance from millions of families, and drive up healthcare costs for those who can least afford it. Here in New York, over 1.4 million of our neighbors and loved ones could lose their coverage, including 730,000 people who rely on the Essential Plan. This dangerous legislation would devastate our hospitals, saddling them with a $1.3 billion in uncompensated care, and impose Medicaid work requirements that harm seniors and people with disabilities and caregivers already struggling to make ends meet. Make no mistake, these actions are not just reckless, they are fatal to countless families across the country. I'm proud that I, along with every other Democrat in the House, stood shoulder to shoulder in opposing this atrocious bill that passed by one vote. But the battle is far from over. With this legislation now headed to the Senate, we must keep fighting. This isn't just about resisting bad policies. It's about holding Republicans accountable for a cruel agenda that prioritizes the wealthiest Americans at the expense of everyone else. The same fight for justice and accountability extends to immigration. As a member of the Judiciary Committee's Immigration Subcommittee, I've condemned Republicans' inhumane policies and voted against their legislation that denies civil rights and due process. Stopping unlawful deportations is essential to protecting the rule of law and upholding constitutional rights for all. We're also seeing the same authoritarian mindset in Trump's attacks on our universities. Under the false pretense of combating anti-Semitism, Trump is attempting to defund institutions like Columbia and Harvard, gutting critical medical research, and weaponizing hate. I do not understand how denying funds for critical medical research helps fight anti-Semitism. I dedicated my career to fighting anti-Semitism, and I will not allow the pretense of fighting it to be used as a tool of oppression. These attacks on our institutions don't stop there. Trump has enlisted powerful allies such as Elon Musk, who spent nearly $300 million to install Trump in office and now exerts enormous influence over the government. We've seen agencies shuttered, tens of thousands of civil servants fired, and sensitive data, including Social Security records, seized. These records were always considered secret, and now they may be used by DOJ for other purposes. These actions are designed to destroy public trust and dismantle the government from within. I'm fighting every day to protect the institutions that serve the people, to safeguard the federal workforce, and to ensure that Americans continue to receive the benefits and services they've earned. To that end, I'm working closely with legal experts, civil rights organizations, advocacy groups, and our Attorney General, Tish James, to hold Trump accountable in court. And we are winning in a lot of cases. While Trump may misunderstand his constitutional responsibilities, the courts do not. Judges of all ideological backgrounds are striking down his unconstitutional actions and demanding that his administration follow the law. I've contributed to these efforts by filing amicus briefs and will continue to do so at every opportunity. I've also stood proudly at rallies, from the steps of Stonewall to government offices across the district and in Washington, to send a clear message. No matter how hard they try to silence us, we will speak louder. We will stand stronger and we will fight harder. Your voice is our greatest tool. History shows that united, Americans can stop harmful policies, as we did in 2017 when grassroots mobilization preserved the Affordable Care Act. If we thwart Trump's agenda now, we can hold our ground until we retake the House next year, weakening his ability to harm our nation. We have defeated Trump before. With your continued engagement, we can prevail again. Thank you for being here and staying engaged, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Congressman Nadler, for working so hard to keep us as a democracy. I know that Kristen Gonzalez is with us, and I know that she's at an airport. So I want her to get
Yes.
on camera and present.
Oh, okay. Well, yes. Was that a yes to being on camera, or we accept a nod on camera? As long as you're able to hear and see me, I think that's what's important. Okay, great. Well, it's so good to be here. As Susan mentioned, I am in at LaGuardia on my way to a wedding, so I appreciate you all giving me the chance to present tonight, but also apologies for any background noise. I want to congratulate deeply the new directors as who are part of this Dependents Association. I see some familiar faces, and for the new faces, I really do look forward to getting to know you, and our office is certainly here to be a resource. So with that, I'm going to just quickly run through some of the updates we have for you all. I want to start with Mount Sinai Beth Israel. As Susan mentioned, we were part of the effort in the coalition to push back on the closure. Unfortunately, Mount Sinai had received approval from the Department of Health at the state level, and then unfortunately lost in court. So they did close the Beth Israel site. But as part of our role as elected officials, I certainly want to credit the Congress member, certainly want to credit the Assembly member and council member, and as well as our colleagues across Lower Manhattan for coming together and making certain demands as part of this closure process. And that includes the 24/7 urgent care, which isn't something we were necessarily initially going to get, but was a result of consistent pressure and advocacy. We're tracking the progress of that urgent care, and actually Mount Sinai is now reporting their numbers to us. I believe since it's open, it had around 750 folks, enter the urgent care, and I think it's important to, and we're working with them to get the word out about this urgent care, because now that they've opened, we certainly want to hold them accountable and ensure that they do not close in the future. We've seen that happen in other communities where they'll use numbers especially for some of the newer urgent cares, a low turnout in patients as a reason to close. So we are certainly not going to let that happen, and are going to continue monitoring the progress that they've made there. I also want to say, on the note of healthcare access for this community, at the state level, there are two important bills that we have been working on, and one of which we passed last year, but unfortunately was vetoed by the governor. So now we're passing again. That is the Litch Act, which would ensure that we have community input and oversight in any hospital closure process. So we are passing that again this session. And then I, as some of you know, sponsored the statewide healthcare assessment bill, S2633. We're also working on getting that passed this year. And what that would essentially do is assess where we have distressed hospital zones so that we know what the impact will be in situations like this when you have one hospital closing and there's additional strain on other hospitals nearby. Of course, here we're talking about Bellevue and NYU Langone. I would also add that in the state budget that we passed, there was 500 million in funding for safety net and distressed hospitals. So in addition to the legislation that we're working on, we were actively advocating for additional funding. I think that's really important right now, given everything you've heard from the Congress member in terms of cuts that we're seeing at the federal level. So we'll continue certainly to advocate for as much funding as possible. Speaking of the budget, I think it's a good transition to some of our housing updates in the budget. I know that we received some questions to our office from members of the Skytown community, so we wanted to update you all on what the outcome was. This year's final budget included 1.3 billion to support affordable housing. That included money for the City of Yes proposal, obviously to support specifically what New York City is doing. But I think some significant highlights are 50 million to expand the housing access voucher program, which helps New Yorkers who are at risk of experiencing homelessness with staying housed. So I think, the housing access voucher program, also known as HAVP, has been a multi-year fight. I also want to credit this Tenants Association that is part of a broader housing coalition that has helped advocate to make this happen for the first time. So I think a significant win, and very happy to see the investment there. We also had 80 million for Mitchell Lama housing. Again, significant that we're being intentional in other types of housing, not just luxury development as a state. So very happy to have seen that. And then there were no changes to rent stabilization in this budget. We also had some questions there. You had Councilmember Powers mention the rent guidelines board. You know, certainly we oppose any increase. I would like to see a rent freeze happen. There is legislation currently proposed by Senator Janaris and Assemblymember Rosenthal to reform the rent guidelines board. And that bill was recently introduced. I think one thing that they noted was under the de Blasio administration, I believe annual increases were at or below 1.5%. But you know, this version of the rent guidelines board under the Adams administration has approved increases totaling almost 10%. And I think this shows a deep inconsistency. And obviously, there needs to be reform in the process because we are not seeing the needs of tenants certainly centered. I want to also, I know I'm coming up on time, but happy to speak more and answer questions on the housing piece. A couple of additional notes on what we passed in the budget. As many of you know, I chair two committees in the state Senate, the Senate Elections Committee. So through the budget, we reformed the public finance prop program. So I think, you know, we're always looking to center public matching on small dollar donations. What we did was, you know, essentially reform the program to continue focusing on that, but to make it a little bit easier for campaigns that are running grassroots campaigns, which I think is good for our democratic process. And then as chair of the Senate Internet and Technology Committee, I also negotiated through the first language that we have passed as a state and some of the first language in the country on chatbots. So when you think about artificial intelligence and chat GPTs and your chat GPTs of the world and companion bots specifically, and the increase in stories we've seen on mental health issues because of abuse of these systems, we actually passed language to protect New Yorkers in the budget. And then in addition, focus on mental health, which means that money will be put into a suicide prevention fund, specifically because we've seen suicides come as a result of interaction engaging with AI chatbots. I guess to close, I'm going to also flag a few things just in terms of our office. We were recently at the Stuytown Flea Market. It was really lovely to see you all there. We are located at 42nd and 2nd Avenue. So please, for anyone who wants to, you know, come to our office, seek help, we are always you know, happy and available. We also do our office hours at the Kips Bay Library once a month. So happy to post that. We've been receiving a lot of constituent cases from Stuytown around Beam and casework. I recently did a walking tour with Beam to make sure that, you know, some of the issues were addressed. If you have tickets open for repairs in your apartments and you're not getting a timely response, we are actively in contact with them. So I just also wanted to encourage everyone to use us as a resource and reach out to my office to ensure that you are getting the best possible care from Blackstone. So with that, I'm going to close. Happy to stay before boarding and answer some questions, but deeply appreciate the time and ability to present.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll go right into questions. And the one that I'm going to ask is both for Congressman Nadler and our Senator Gonzalez, and it's a kind of a weird question. So if you don't want to answer it, just tell me. It's okay. We'll move on to something else. And understand, I'm reading the question as written. So it's has to do with seniors, the long-term care insurance. The yearly premiums are astronomical. A policy I started in 2002 at a premium of $3,465 is now $14,388.30. And if the policy stays the same, the premium in 2028 will be $20,547. Only Senator Gonzalez's office has tried to help. Why are my voted elected government officials, Epstein and Nadler, not making loud public noise and fighting these horrific annual increases?
Well, since Senator Gonzalez is, according to the question, acting on this, I suppose I should answer it first. Long-term care insurance is out of control. I share the frustration with rising long-term care insurance premiums. As I said in my opening statement, healthcare is a human right, and no one should bear financial burdens like this. However, we're fighting now to save the healthcare insurance, to save what we have. Senator Gonzalez is in the state legislature, controlled by Democrats, and she may be able to pass legislation or to include in the budget measures that will help with this problem. I am in the Republican-controlled Congress, and I'm fighting to keep healthcare from being wrecked. The hope of getting improvements in healthcare, long-term insurance, or anything else will have to wait, frankly, on the federal level until the Democrats get control of at least one house of the Congress, which hopefully will be next year.
Okay, do you want to say anything, Kristen?
Yes, certainly want to thank the Congress member for advocating and fighting so hard in a really hostile Congress and federal environment. So perfect segue to, state right now is one of the last lines of defense for a lot of these issues, and certainly when it comes to insurance and healthcare access. There is legislation that exists. It is S 1179 for those who are interested. And I've been working with my colleagues, Senators Mayer and Krueger and May, to establish and to help get this bill passed, which would establish a statewide public trust that would give New Yorkers a public option for long-term care insurance. I think we need the public option. We can't count on the private sector to be our solution. As we heard, it's not working for specifically Sci-Town residents, and want to thank the member of your community who asked this question and has been working with us. So we'll continue to work on that. I also would like to recognize this another bill, the New York Health Act, S 3425. And that is, a single payer option for healthcare. So we are also fighting for that bill. It is a longer term fight. But I think now is the time for the state to step up and be leading, because as the Congress member mentioned, we have a Democratic majority and a Democratic governor who should be taking these issues very seriously.
Okay, thank you very much.
Let me just add, if I can, that
Please.
on the federal level, we've also had the Medicare for All bill. I've been sponsoring it since I got to Congress. It's a single payer healthcare. We also had, during the debate over the Affordable Care Act, the public option, which didn't get in. But one of these days, when the Democrats control, we may be able to pass the Medicare for All single payer bill.
This question is for you, Congressman Nadler. I had mentioned earlier this case that potentially could come before the Supreme Court and do away with tenant protections. I just wondered whether you had any thoughts about how worried we should be. Should we be that worried?
Well, let me start by saying that I've been fighting the tenant on tenant matters for 55 years. In that time, the landlords have gone to the Supreme Court, I think 3 times. Their argument has been that this is a taking, and rent control began in World War II as part of World War II price controls. After the war, it remained in certain areas, New York, I think San Francisco, some other areas. And landlords have repeatedly gone to the Supreme Court, arguing that this is a taking, which is without fair compensation, which is unconstitutional. The Supreme Court, on 3 occasions, I think, has ruled the other way, has ruled that rent control is not a taking, that is proper regulation. I would be worried right now, because with this Supreme Court, it is an extremely conservative court, and they may very well declare rent measures unconstitutional. Although to do it, they would have to overcome 3 Supreme Court precedents, and I don't know that they would do that. So the answer is they might, because they're a very conservative court. But to do that, they'd have to ignore 3 Supreme Court precedents, which they may be unwilling to do.
All right, thank you very much. Before the skyhook comes and drags Kristen Gonzalez away to the boarding gate, I have one thing I'd like to ask, if you're still there.
Yes, no worries. Yeah, thank you.
Can you update us on bail reform loopholes?
That is a great question. So I would say there is not necessarily a loophole with bill reform. If you all recall, in not last year's budget, but the year, actually now the two sessions are blending together. I believe it was last year's state or executive budget. We did address bail reform. We did that by increasing judicial discretion when they are making decisions about bail. So that was something that had been asked by a lot of constituents in our district. And, I hopefully, proof of action at the state level on this issue. In this year's executive budget, we haven't heard, since we've passed those initial set of changes to bail reform, that there was a need to reopen that conversation. So we did not pass any language regarding bail reform. And I believe the program is working well and as intended. What I will say is this year's budget focused on discovery reform, which is a separate legal process. And as part of that conversation, we did, allocate more money for both public defenders and prosecutors. I believe we allocated 135 million in our budget. And it required courts to consider the prosecutor's efforts as a whole, whether there was any prejudice or defense. And I think the version of that we passed of discovery reform was very much a compromise between prosecutors and defenders to ensure that we aren't unnecessarily dismissing cases and we're seeing as many cases as possible to trial. So, I think, again, these were some of the things that we heard from our district attorneys. I know DA Bragg was very supportive of these changes right here in Manhattan. So yeah, happy to speak more about it. But right now, bail reform was not part of the conversation.
Okay, thank you very much.
No problem.
I'm now going to go to a question about lead paint, and I don't know if it's something that either of our electeds want to weigh in on, but the question is, what is Beam's responsibility with respect to peeling lead paint? The reason this question came up is that during one of the pipe repair at one of the buildings, we got a few calls from tenants who said that they noticed that when they undid the cabinets, when they took away the cabinets in which the pipes were housed, that the steam pipe was and the gas pipe were absolutely peeling like mad, and they were really concerned about lead paint. So Beam, as the landlord of a pre-1960 building, is responsible for keeping painted surfaces in good condition. Under federal rules, specifically the EPA's renovation, repair, and painting rule, they are required to use lead-safe work practices whenever disturbing paint, regardless of whether a child under 6 lives in the apartment. That means using certified contractors and following specific safety steps like wet scraping, wet sanding, plastic containment, HEPA vacuuming, and thorough cleaning afterward. Beam has previously indicated that they use lead-safe practices in every paint job, so they should have no problem following those standards whenever repairs are needed. However, I must say, in contacting Beam, their stance was that if there's no child under 6 living in an apartment, they're not required to follow the more stringent practices. So I don't know if there's any commentary to that.
I'll just say, I mean, this is a local issue, not a federal issue, but the law, the law in New York, the New York law does require these safety measures. The landlord or contractor can't just ignore them. And I would assume that if someone went to court, the court would order any work done to be done according to the state legal standards, which are, as you said.
Thank you.
Yeah, certainly agree. Local issue. if just for whoever asked this question, if there's concern about lead paint, and we want to see testing happen, we can work with the city on that. There is, I believe, a responsibility for remediation just to keep tenants safe. But please, again, reach out to our office. Happy to talk with individuals, and then we'll also follow up with Blackstone as well to get a more clear response from them. Because that does seem odd that they push back. So yeah, happy to follow up on that.
Thank you very much.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but boarding is starting in a few minutes, so I do have to get out of the spot and over to the gate.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all so much.
Okay.
Thank you for having me all. Bye. Bye.
Have a good flight.
Thank you. Bye.
I had some questions from Keith, but he had to run. And so I think that's probably the end of the questions for our elected representatives. But I did want to get one or two other questions that are really TA oriented in before we close the meeting, which is somebody was asked.
Well, I'll leave the meeting then, so thank you all.
Okay, thank you very much for your participation and information. So, okay. This might be of interest. Somebody asked, given the recent controversy surrounding Paul Weiss and its settlement with the Trump administration, can you speak to whether any of this will impact the firm's current representation of the Stuyvesant Town Peter Cooper Village Tenants Association, either in terms of capacity, focus, or conflicts of interest? And our answer is that Paul Weiss was only involved with the Tenants Association during the MetLife sale of 2006. After Tishman Speyer bought the complex, the TA retained Collins, Dobkin, and Miller, a well-established tenant attorney, so we no longer have any involvement or relationship with Paul Weiss. Let's see. I had talked about the compensation for the gas shutdown, but I can just go into it a little more before we close down. So I had mentioned earlier that prior to the latest round of gas piping repairs, the compensation under the old program was a daily credit of $35 for a 1-bedroom, $50 for a 2-bedroom, 2 flex or 3-bedroom, $65, for 3 flex 4-bedroom, $80, and for a 5-bedroom, $95 credit a day. So per month, it was a credit for a 1-bedroom of $980, 2 bedrooms, $1,400, 2 flex or 3-bedroom, $1,820, 3 flex 4-bedroom, $2,240, and for a 5-bedroom, $2,660. Well, under the new program, for 4 weeks, 28 days, the total, no matter how many bedrooms you have, is $750. So we are $230 short for a 1-bedroom under the old scheme and many more dollars under the new scheme. So I think you can understand why the TA had a discussion with Beam, because we felt that the new program was simply, it wasn't as beneficial to tenants as the old scheme. So I just thought you might like to have those numbers. Now, we had a question about what has become of the super security promised for 14th Street between First Avenue and Avenue A. Cops there told me that 2 cops would always be present, but they're almost never around. This is a great question. I'm really sorry that Keith had to leave. I at least can tell you that the 14th Street is still relatively clean. We have seen some illegal vendors around 16th and 1st and across the street by Dwayne Reed. when tenants association board members see that, they take photos and send to Keith, and Keith calls his task force, and they come and ask the people to leave. Now, what we are still waiting for is we were promised a command center on 14th Street. Apparently, this is a very sophisticated piece of equipment that isn't just like, you can't go into a used car lot and buy it. It has to be constructed from scratch. It's $1 million, and we're still waiting. So we haven't forgotten about it. Every now and then we get on the horn and we, nudge Keith to nudge the mayor, and we will keep on it. And it is now 7:30, and I know some of you had a problem that there was some issues you couldn't hear. The whole thing has been recorded, and if you haven't gotten the first part of it, then you can go and listen and catch up on what you didn't hear. As always, it's been a pleasure, and I hope to see you at the next annual meeting. Thank you very much, and good night.